Welcome to the workshop Strategic Planning 101. Where do we start? This workshop is brought to you by Southwest Sport and Mallee Sports Assembly. Hi, I'm Mike Neoh, CEO of Southwest Sport, and I'll be presenting the workshop. A key question is, what is a strategic plan? It's basically assessing where you are and where you're heading. It can be simple or complex. A key question that is often asked is whether to use an external consultant or whether to do the plan internally. That really depends on the complexity. Things like whether it's going to be a simple plan or whether it's going to be complicated. My advice is to clubs that if it's complicated, takes a lot of effort, it's probably worthwhile getting an external facilitator. Whereas if the plan is quite simple and takes little effort and your volunteers have the capacity, that you can do that in-house. I'll talk a little bit more about the pros and cons of internal and external facilitation a little bit later on. One of the things that needs to be considered is working together and buy-in from the full committee. A plan shouldn't be driven by one particular individual. We need to make sure that everyone's engaged and you bring everyone along for the journey. What you don't want is one person driving the strategic plan, providing their direction, and you don't have buy-in or engagement from the key stakeholders. The first step that I would suggest to the board or committee is to do a bit of scoping so that when you do engage, you know what questions to ask around what areas. Some of the areas that you might want to look at when you scope are programs, culture of the club, marketing, growth, strategies, governance, or it might even be facility development. Once you identify some of your key areas, then you can target your engagement around questions that actually give you the answers to what you're looking for. The second step is really a SWOT analysis, but the language that I tend to use rather than strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats is simple language for your stakeholders, such as what should we continue to focus on? That really brings out the strengths. What needs to improve? That identifies the weaknesses. What we can use to help us get there? That's the opportunities. And also, are there any things that prevent us from achieving our goals? So basically, threats and force fields that stop you achieving what you need. Third step is really to look at the questions that you want to engage on. There are two types. The first are specific questions, and these questions can come from the committee's scoping. For example, if you're looking at facilities, you would have a specific question around the type of facilities that you would need. The second type of questions are open-ended ones, and these are really helpful in terms of accessing any gaps or issues that the board might have missed during their scoping. They'd be very open-ended and they provide the stakeholders with the opportunity to provide broad answers, but also solutions to some of the issues. As an example of a specific question, you might ask from your scoping, if you have a particular slant on facility development, it could be, what are your priorities for facility development? That helps target the question and focus the stakeholders on the particular theme that you're looking at. Whereas with an open-ended question, it is a lot broader and it provides scope for the participants or stakeholders to provide their particular slant. So it could be simply, where do you want the club to be in 3 years? What will help us get there? And that will provide solutions and opportunities for the board rather than the board formulating all the solutions themselves. And another question may be, what may prevent us from getting there? So identifying the barriers and threats to achieving those strategies. The next step with engagement is really looking at who you want to engage with, the type of methods that you'll use, and really narrowing in on a focus. With the who, it could be members, So your members might be broken down into players, parents, volunteers, past players, supporters. It could be the committee that you engage with. You could do that individually so that each committee member has equity in terms of providing responses. Often when you have a forum or a meeting with committee, you might have a loud voice that does most of the talking. So it's always important to give each committee member an independent opportunity to have their say. Local council or local government is very important in terms of engaging with. They often have strategies and plans that are relevant to your organisation or to your sport or to your city. State or regional sporting bodies, for example, if you're golf, it could be Golf Victoria. If you're football, netball, it could be Netball Victoria and AFL. They are really important to engage with to see where their directions lie. Sponsors, we often take sponsors for granted. So just asking sponsors simple questions can give you insights to what they want, what products they have, and are they happy with your sponsorship. And regional sports assemblies, they often have great resources to help you. So Mallee Sports Assembly or Southwest Sport in your respective area. Just in terms of methods, there are different types of methods that you might want to use, some formal, some informal, surveys, feedback forms, one-on-one meetings, and desktop research where you might go online and look at some of your stakeholders' plans to ascertain where they're heading. It could be a simple note that goes home with the junior players asking parents on their thoughts on the club, where they'd like to see the club head. The focus, and when we do surveying or polls or feedback mechanisms, we tend to make sure that our surveys are specific to a stakeholder. Having one survey or one survey fits all doesn't always work. For example, with council, it could be around their health or wellbeing plan, whereas with a league, it could be around participation plans. With a state body, it could be around their state focus or their regional focus or grants. And with sports assemblies such as Mallee and Southwest, it could be around what club development's available, what resources and what grants. Step 4 is really narrowing down the information. So once you pull together all the feedback from stakeholders, you may have done some research online, you really need to start grouping. And I would suggest 4 to 5 key areas. I call them pillars. And I think it's a really good way to help narrow down that information. So try to fit all the information into maybe 4 to 5 pillars, and they can be your key pillars for your strategic plan. I've also found it very useful to look at the key terms, and out of the engagement, you can actually put the feedback into a program called word clouds, and the word clouds actually highlight common themes or words that are being used really frequently. This word cloud here on the screen demonstrates what are the key priorities for that particular stakeholder group. It was governance, equity, culture, welcoming, transparency, strategic. So the club that I work with to ascertain that feedback, they had a very strong focus on values. And that brings us to the club vision, mission and club values. You can often shape your vision, mission and club values from those key terms that come out of the engagement. With your plan, it will generally have a vision, mission and values. The vision and mission are often confused, but basically a mission is where you want to be in the long run. So it will be our club will be what our club is aiming to achieve, whereas a mission is what you're currently doing. So we are providing or we are doing. And the values is really setting the tone of the club. So what do you want people to think about your club? How do you want your members to act, your spectators, etc.? So it's really setting that scene on the culture of your club. As an example of narrowing down the information, you would come up with, say, 4 to 5 pillars, as I mentioned. These are just some examples of pillars. Your club might have different priorities, or your stakeholders might have raised different issues, but just 5 examples of a pillar. One could be governance. The second one might be club environment. That's both physical, such as infrastructure or buildings, and the other aspect of club environment could be social. So the culture of your club, how you want the tone of your club to be when someone enters that club. Sustainability could also refer to financial or non-financial. The pillar of communication could involve marketing, promotion, advocacy, partnerships. And another pillar that you may want to use is programming and club development. So what activities are you going to run for participants under programming? And with club development, how do you want to develop your club? Is it improve coaching courses? Is it responsible serving of alcohol courses? Is it officiating courses? Is it volunteer education? So they're just 5 examples of pillars, but you will ascertain what your pillars are from the feedback from your stakeholders. The 5th step is starting to formulate the plan. So we have our pillar, for example, governance. What I like to do is provide a tagline. So what does governance mean in very simple terms and words that you could use to the parents or your stakeholders? So the tagline could be something as simple as how we run the club. So if people don't understand exactly what governance means, a tagline such as how we run the club helps convey that message. I also like to put in a statement of intent for each pillar. So in terms of governance and how we run the club, we want to be a high functioning and sustainable club. That gives a really positive message for prospective stakeholders such as sponsors or players or parents or volunteers that you know where you're heading and you have a positive statement about that. Once you have your pillar, how we run the club, a statement of intent, a high functioning and sustainable club, then you might move into, say, 4 or 5 actions that you've identified from your feedback. And those actions will be what you want to do, how you're going to do it, what the desired outcome is. So when you've implemented the action, what's the outcome? And it's always important to have a measure so that you can look back and say, well, we have achieved the outcome because this is our measure. The resource, and that could be financial or it could be in kind or HR, such as staff members, if you have staff, or it could be committee members or volunteers, or it could even be templates provided by your state sporting body. It's very good to also put in what the priority of that action is, so high, medium or low, and a time frame. Now, there is a bit of a link between priority and time frame, but high priorities don't always happen quickly. For example, a facility might be a high priority, but it could take 3 to 5 years, whereas something that's less of a priority but easily implemented could happen tomorrow. And the last aspect of an action plan is who. This provides accountability so that in 3 months or 6 months or 12 months, when you're monitoring the plan, you can go back and say to that committee or that person, has that been achieved? And if not, why? And do they need some additional support to implement the action that they were listed as doing? So let's have a look at how that action plan all comes together. We'll start with the pillar, which is governance. The tagline, how we run the club. The statement of intent is a high functioning and sustainable club. The action, all right, one action that you might identify from your feedback is that we need to improve our decision making. So in the past, your decision making's been ad hoc, or it might have been the squeaky wheel that got all the attention. So how are we going to address that? All right, we're going to develop some key policies. So that's how we're going to do it. What's the outcome? Well, better decision making. It's as simple as that. Your issue was improved decision making. So what's the outcome that you're looking for? Better decision making. And the measure could be something as simple as an actual physical policy manual or the policies going up on your website. And the resource to implement that could be just committee time, could be templates from your state sporting body or your local regional sports assembly, such as Mallee or Southwest. And the priority might be high because a lot of your decisions might be ad hoc, and you have a new committee, so your time frame might be 2 months. So the time frame provides a period to get those policies in place, and we're going to dedicate it or allocate that to a subcommittee, so they're responsible for that. So in December, we'll go to the committee and ask them, have they completed that task, and if not, why? And do they need more time? Do they need more resources? And that just provides that accountability factor. The use of the plan, I generally categorise this into 3 areas. The first one is a strategic plan is very useful for the current and future committees. It sets out the pathway for the current committee, and if there is transition of members, whether it's, say, a new president or even a whole new committee or a future committee, it provides a transition from what you've been doing to what you'll continue to do. The new committee may decide to review that maybe after a year or so, but it's really important to have continuity for the, say, first 1 to 3 years, so that you actually get things achieved and you don't keep chopping and changing your plan and just tread watering. So it's really important to have that continuity. So that's one of the uses. The second use is as a marketing tool. So you can use your plan for sponsors, parents, schools to promote your programs, players, supporters, volunteers, and even the media. So promoting your club by launching your strategic plan, or if you have a key initiative in your plan, it might be a new program or a new facility, then you can go to the media and say, that was part of our strategic plan, we've implemented it, and get some really good profile for your club around that activity or on your plan. The third use of a plan is advocacy. Often funding bodies and also planning authorities now want a strategic plan from clubs. So before you apply for funding or apply for some resourcing to do an initiative, they'll say, what's in your strategic plan? Have you already got facility development or gender equity in terms of facilities in your plan? Have you got an older adult program that lists the activities in your plan? That just helps with the advocacy when you're looking for funding or going to state government, local government or federal government for support. Plan format. When I develop a plan for a club, I normally provide 2 formats. The first one is just a summary. So it's really for promotional use. It would have the vision, mission, values, the top 4 to 5 pillars and the taglines and the statements of intent. You may even put some high profile actions, but that's optional. So the use of that plan is really for promotion. It's generally glossy, it's printed professionally, and you have it on hand ready to promote your club. The second version of the plan would be for committee use. So it would have all of the above plus the action plan. So as I mentioned before, each pillar would have 4 or 5 actions, who's going to do it, when, what resources. It's a fairly lengthy document and one that you probably don't need to show to all the stakeholders. The stakeholders just want to know where your club's heading, but you really need the full plan for the committee so that you can track your actions and make sure that you monitor that things are happening. The full plan can be a Word document or an Excel sheet so that you can tick off 2 actions that you've completed this year and added maybe another action for next year. So it's a living document. I would normally do an action plan for 1 year. At the end of the year, you would review it, take out the activities that you've completed or just put a tick next to them. Then you would add new activities that might have arisen recently. This is an example of the promotional strategic plan, one I did for a local surf lifesaving club. They had a high priority on a potential facility. As you can see, it's glossy, it's professionally printed, it's got the vision, mission, values. Their key pillars were governance, celebration, environment, engagement, and vigilance. And there were taglines. So for the governance, it was our club. For celebration, it was our people and culture. For vigilance, it was community safety. For engagement, it was promoting our activity. And the environment was to protect the environment and grow the environment. Really good document to promote to new members, to parents, to sponsors, and to the media. And this is the extension of that, the full plan for the committee. So you would have your glossy aspects to it, your vision, your mission, but you would also have your operational plan for the first year. So you would have your key activities under each pillar, who was going to do it, the resourcing, and the priority and timeframes. So this is the document. This is the living one that the board would use to make sure that you track your plan, you tick off things, you add things annually, and you update it. Just in terms of if you use a external facilitator, my recommendation would be about 12 weeks. Obviously, that's not 38 hours each week, but it gives you time to engage, let the engagement occur while you're doing other things. So the first step would be to do the scoping with the board, just to find out where you think the themes are for your club, then use those themes to engage. So the engagement might be over 2 to 3 weeks. It might be surveying. It could be online with SurveyMonkey or tools like that. And while that engagement is happening, you can use that time wisely. You can also look at other plans. So do a desktop audit. Go online and look at the council's plan, or you could look at your state supporting body's plan to see where they're heading. Once you have accessed all that information, it's about narrowing that down. That could take 1 to 2 weeks. Draft up some pillars, so your 5 top themes, some taglines, some statements of intent, and then you start drafting up your action plan, which would have 4 or 5 actions from your engagement under each pillar. Then you could ratify the plan, print it, and launch it. And the launch is a really good opportunity to get some profile for your club. So you might do that at the AGM, or you might do it at the start of the season, get the media, get sponsors involved, and use it as a marketing tool. So all in all, if you were to take this format, it would take about 12 weeks. As I said, it's not full time. There are a lot of things happening concurrently, but it's probably a 12-week process. You can do it in 1 day, or you could do it in 3 hours. But the engagement is really important. If you're serious about engagement and having buy-in from your stakeholders, it does take time to engage. It does take time for the stakeholders to get back to you, to chase up the stakeholders if they haven't got back to you. So the 12-week period is what I would suggest, and that's what I would do as an external facilitator. And if I was doing one internally for my organisation, I would make sure that I covered all those aspects thoroughly. Back to the dilemma of internal versus external facilitation. As I said, it gets back to the complexity. So how complicated the plan could be, and also the effort. So if you're a volunteer committee, it will take effort. So if you have your house in order and you've only got a few areas that you want to work on, it's going to be a very simple strategic plan and it requires little effort. You could do that internally. If it was going to be more complicated, where it might involve a new facility or a master plan or even a long-term finance plan, it will take 12 weeks and you don't have the volunteer time, everyone's busy, then you possibly could look at an external facilitator. As I said, there's pros and cons. It's really up to the club. And one of the barriers in the past for having external facilitation was funding that facilitation. But now there are grants available for that. So the clubs can apply for grants. You can contact your local sports assembly, Mallee or Southwest. We're aware of grants where you can apply for a grant to do that planning at no cost to your club. Just some of the positives, I guess, for having external facilitation. The first is that the facilitation is neutral. So using Mallee Sports Assembly or Southwest Sport, we're not invested in your club or your sport. We can take an overview, bird's eye look at that particular process, and also all your personnel can be fully engaged. So instead of the secretary or the president running the session, taking notes, they can all be active participants and focus on the task of contributing rather than hosting and facilitating the process. Consultants or sports assemblies often have access to trend information, what's happening with participation or your sport at the state and federal level. We also have close contacts with all levels of government, state sporting associations. We're in regular contacts. We know what programs they're offering, what their priorities are for regional Victoria or your sport, and also grant opportunities. So if you identify actions in your action plan, we might be able to link a grant with that particular initiative. It also reduces the effort on your volunteer committee, particularly if it's a complicated plan. So it takes some of that legwork out where your volunteers can participate. They can actually provide feedback on draft plans and on themes and on the mission, but a lot of the legwork can be undertaken by the consultant. And I think the last one's really important. Often when plans are done in-house or by clubs, they go on for quite a while, whereas if you have a facilitator, they drive the process and keep it on track. So they will have timeframes and say, all right, we need the feedback by this date. We need feedback on the draft by this date. So it actually keeps the project moving and keeps it on track and also on focus. So that's the end of the presentation. Certainly, if you're looking for some support in terms of templates to implement a strategic plan internally, contact Southwest Sport or Mallee Sports Assembly. Our emails are up on the screen. But if you do want facilitation done externally, whether it's through Southwest Sport, a Mallee Sport, or another consultant, call your sports assembly. We can talk to you about what grants are available. We can also provide a quote if you're using Mallee Sports Assembly or Southwest Sport, or you want to use us, or if you need more information about how to get a facilitator. So thank you for your time. I hope you found it useful, and good luck.